thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Gorgel, I just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping reminders. We've got Q&A enabled, so if you have questions, please feel free to submit your questions. We will do our best to answer them live, and if we aren't able to get to them, we will try to follow up post-event, and we also might be answering some in the actual Q&A box, so thank you. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is that we'll have some brief comments again from Councilmember Gorgel and a little bit of a presentation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Gorgel for some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We just wanted to give an opportunity for folks who have questions about the budget and also to learn more about our budget. I know that this was a different year than we usually have. It's a one-year budget, and I know that folks were concerned about this year's budget. So tonight is really just about to learn about the budget, and then we would love to hear your feedback. And if you have any ideas that you would like us to consider, we also look forward to that conversation. So thank you so much for coming, and I will turn it over to Travis.
Yeah, thank you so much, Councilmember Gorgel. My name is Travis Doran. I'm a member of the city staff, and I serve as the interim chief financial officer. I want to say good evening to everybody. Thank you to Councilmember Gorgel for organizing this. I see several other council members in the attendee list, and so thank you all for creating this avenue for some continued public engagement around the budget in, as you noted, decidedly different budget cycle. So I'm going to share some visual material here as sort of a context setter, and I know that we're eagerly getting over to Q&A as well, and so I certainly want to be as brief as possible in covering sort of 4 of the 7 outcomes that the city has prioritized. So want to confirm that everybody can see my slides, looking at my co-panelists to make sure that these are up. Wonderful. So I'll start here by describing a little bit about the city's philosophy for really the last 16 years with respect to budgeting. In many traditional budgets, it can be a prevailing of the status quo by design almost in some cases, where the dollars that you received as a city function in the previous budget cycle sort of serves as a baseline for future budget cycles. The city of Fort Collins, on the other hand, follows an outcomes-based budgeting methodology called budgeting for outcomes, or BFO, where the citizens and residents, by way of their elected officials, have prioritized 7 key areas of the city. And in theory, every dollar that the city spends of the taxpayer or utility payer dime should be servicing one of these 7 outcomes that the community has prioritized. So from left to right, the outcomes that our community has chosen: neighborhood livability and social health, culture and recreation, economic health, environmental health, safe community, transportation and mobility, and then having a high-performing government. Now, as we've entered sort of the public policy side of this budget, as you'll see on the dates that I share when we wrap up these slides, we've divided our council work sessions, the public-facing side of this budget, by the outcome areas. And last Tuesday, we started by covering our first 4 areas, and these are the areas I'm going to share with you this evening. So culture and recreation, environmental health, economic health, and transportation mobility. Councilmember Gorgel has set up a follow-on listening session for 1 week from today where we would cover the remaining 3 outcomes, but we wanted to pace this content so that it moves along in parallel with the city council and that our residents can follow along in time. So we'll talk a little bit about the city services and overall budget, but very rapidly look to get to the 4 outcome areas themselves. So for the uninitiated, as far as how your local government works, we've got a net city budget of just over $500 million a year at the city. So in the case of this year, the budget was $534 million. And in the city manager's recommended budget, you'll see a $522 million proposed budget. And that's what's under consideration for adoption by the city council over the course of the next 2 months. Fort Collins is what we call a full service city, meaning that in addition to some of the traditional functions of local government around public safety, law enforcement, fire, parks, recreation, planning and transit services, sustainability services around economics, environmental health, and social sustainability in your administrative functions. We also run previously 4, and now with the introduction of broadband internet services, 5 publicly held utilities in the form of the electric utility, 3 water-based utilities, and of course Fort Collins connection. So we're a 24/7, 365-day-a-year operation, and this budget covers all of the functions that you see here. As kind of an overview, before we move on to the outcome areas themselves, at least the first 4 outcome areas, wanted to piggyback on some of Councilmember Gorgel's comments around the unique aspects of this year's budget. Of course, we typically budget 2 years at a time. So in a normal year, we would be budgeting 2021 and 2022 right now. Given the impact of COVID, both in terms of the constraints it's put on our people power, our city staff resources, as well as our elected officials and the community at large, there's also been a pretty significant revenue impact given the effects of the stay-at-home orders and the general retreat, if you will, from a retail environment here in our Fort Collins area businesses. So as a result, the city is collecting less in sales tax, and we're being forced to consider some really tough trade-offs in this budget. So while there are some investments that will be made in city services to increase and expand city facilities and services to the community, this is also a budget that's characterized by stop doing lists and reductions. Above all, we're going to continue to prioritize the public-facing aspects of this budget and steward our resources. We have 7 elected officials that we serve, and they've made a very clear list of priorities that reflects the community priorities at large. And then we've got a workforce of around 2,500 coworkers here at the city as well that provide those 24/7, 365 services. So the recommended budget itself, if you look online, and I'll share the link with you as this presentation wraps up, everything kind of revolves around this 2020 strategic plan. It's a 5-year plan where we lay out 56 objectives underneath those 7 outcomes. And here again, the budget exists as the set of resources and tactics that we use to accomplish those community objectives. So the budget, in a sense, we think of as a tool as much as we think of it as a roadmap or blueprint for where do the dollars go. It's really how do we achieve our outcomes as dictated by the community and council. If all goes well here this year and next, we would return to our normal 2-year cycle starting in 2023. So now on to the outcomes themselves. And these are the same 4 outcomes that we covered with the City Council last Tuesday. We'll start with the culture and recreation outcome and the philosophical statement that our City Council has made. Fort Collins provides and maximizes access to diverse cultural and recreational amenities. It's been clear time and time again that our community is one that prioritizes access to, and I'll just go around the slide here, public parks, cultural services in the form of art in public places, performing arts, adaptive recreation opportunities, as well as a very broad set of wellness-based recreation opportunities through our recreation system. And then the theater and dance, primarily out of our Lincoln Center, but out of several other city facilities as well. So this is our first outcome area that we'll cover. And I'll share with you just at a high level, what are the changes that you might see if you've been a resident within Fort Collins and have grown accustomed to the current state of city services? So just working down the list as kind of the more notable items that we would call your attention to. We are considering a reduced set of recreation facility hours at certain city facilities, including the Adora Pool and Ice Center, or EPIC, City Park Pool, the Foothills Activity Center at the Foothills Mall, and then the farm at Lee Martinez Park. These reduced hours will be well communicated if they are approved by the council, and they're based really on visitation traffic and when do we get peak visitors at those facilities. On the flip side of that coin, you can expect expanded programming at the Gardens on Spring Creek. If you haven't been there lately, that's a facility that has been built out substantially in the Great Lawn, an amphitheater, and a butterfly house there. So there'll be expanded programming and learning opportunities there. Our community parks, we have made cuts to the maintenance of our parks in the form of equipment, some amounts of staff hours devoted to beautification of those parks. But we're going to do so in a way that hopefully minimizes the impact to the community. So this would be, for example, because it's very much still up to staff determination, going a longer frequency between mowing the grass, for instance. One of the key redirects or redeploys of this budget cycle is taking the conservation trust money, which is really a lottery funded revenue stream for the city. We usually use that for acquisition and construction of the multi-purpose trails around town. So those are the bike, pedestrian, and horseback trails that are paved in our system. We usually use these dollars to acquire and build out the system. And because of the constraints, staff has recommended, pending council approval, that those funds be redirected to maintaining the parks themselves rather than further build out of the system as a temporary measure before we can resume normal economic times in our city. We do have program eliminations at the Carnegie Center for Creativity. The building itself will remain open to community groups that utilize it as meeting space. However, some of the cultural arts programming will be reduced at the facility if it's approved by the council. And then finally, within our urban forest, which in many cases resides within our park system, the emerald ash borer is a threat here to the city's tree canopy. And being that it was discovered this year here in 2020, we've deployed a plan for treatment and, unfortunately, in some cases, removal of the trees that are most at risk from that infestation. So that's culture and recreation in a nutshell. I'll move on to the next outcome area of economic health. Our statement being Fort Collins promotes a healthy, sustainable economy reflecting community values. So here again, just as a visual representation of the services that fall under this outcome area, of course, Fort Collins Connection is rapidly being built out. You'll also see the electric utility or light and power services in the form of the bucket truck picture here, as well as services on one of the vaults in the top right. And then what many would characterize as economic health activities in the form of business assistance, business engagement, and overall nurturing of our small business owners here around town and in supporting the ways in which they contribute to a vibrant community. So some of the changes within economic health, we have up to this point in time had an industry cluster-based program for certain targeted industries and employers here in town. That program is proposed to be put on pause in order to be redirected to COVID-specific economic impacts as we move into a recovery stage from the pandemic. We do have a proposal to pass some of our online sales tax fees through to the filer or to the business owner. Our downtown corridor, which is one of the key areas of economic activity in our community, we've proposed some reduced maintenance there, specifically within the downtown parks, so that we can continue servicing some of the more popular and impactful downtown services, like the floral arrangements, power washing of the streets, and so forth. So here again, it's our hope and intention that is a minimally visible impact. We're pausing the design assistance program within building development review. And then on the enhancement side of things, we will continue with our normally scheduled upgrades to the electric utility and then our 3 water-based utilities in order to continue to deliver safe and reliable power and drinking water. And then finally here on this list, we've got continued support of the build out for the connection broadband utility. Moving to our third outcome area for the evening, environmental health as our third out of 7 outcome areas. Fort Collins promotes, protects, and enhances a healthy and sustainable environment. So here you'll see, just to give you a sense of the current state of our services within this outcome area, recycling and waste shed management. Primarily what you see in this picture here are services provided at the Timberline Recycling Center. We've got our work around our multi-decade climate action plan here in the center. In the top right, maintenance of not just the solar garden that's depicted here, but renewable energy services in general. River and other watershed management activities to maintain the health of the Poudre River and the various bodies of water in town. And then natural areas services. Here again, much like culture and recreation, something that our residents have consistently told us is one of their key contributors to quality of life is access to open space and recreation activities within natural areas. Some of the notable changes within environmental health. We will see, or at least if adopted by the council, some scaled down activities within waste reduction and recycling, primarily around education and membership, so that, again, we can maintain continuity of services and the direct services to the community, but perhaps have to make some trade-offs and sacrifices within the communications and education of the community. We've proposed some amount of scaled down air quality and climate action programming, hopefully in a way that does not jeopardize the city's overall climate goals. I will share with you, this is an area of robust discussion with our city council. And if I were to predict the future, I think there's a very distinct possibility that our city council advocates that these dollars are put back in. So just to illustrate one of the areas in which this is a dynamic and interactive budget. We've got proposed scaling down within natural areas conservation activities. That's primarily purchasing new land to be preserved permanently as a natural area. Given the reduction in tax revenues, there's likely just going to be some amount of scaled back activity here. We are working to electrify the city's vehicle fleet, including the transit system. So we're working towards purchasing electric buses, starting with a single bus here in the near term and an associated charger, with the intention that the fleet is built out to be more fully electrified into the future. There's an environmental learning center up within the Poudre Canyon that's also proposed. And then continued nature in the city investments, which is one of our more popular programs. So these are areas where we hope to continue investing rather than scaling back. And then here, once again, water and wastewater systems are always in need of improvements and enhancements, both in and around the city itself. Finally, for tonight, and I want to transition this back to Councilmember Gorgel and open things up for Q&A after we get through this fourth outcome area, transportation and mobility. One of the key functions of local government. Fort Collins provides a transportation system that moves people and goods safely and efficiently while being accessible, reliable, and convenient. So some of the services that you'll see here within this outcome area, of course, planning of the transportation system itself. Fort Collins is a community that prioritizes what we call multimodal transportation, meaning vehicle, pedestrian, transit, and bicycle traffic. So building out the system of bicycle comfortable roadways has always been a key priority of our city. Got the transit system, Transport, in the top right. Of course, key safety-based activities like snow removal down in the bottom right, as well as other pavement management like pothole maintenance, bicycle and multimodal outreach and education that you see here at the training center that we have over by Roland Moore Park, and then traffic operations in the bottom left, and operations of our several hundred signalized intersections around town to maintain smooth throughput and flow while also keeping vehicle traffic safe. Some of the changes that you will see in this recommended budget, again, subject to council approval. One of the biggest recommendations within this budget for an enhanced service is the construction of an overpass at the intersection of Vine and LeMay within the northeast kind of quadrant of town. It's been a problematic intersection with the railroad crossing there for many years. In some cases, you'll hear stories of vehicles being stuck there in amounts of time measured by the hour and not just by the minute, including school buses. So we're very pleased to make this recommendation to council for a key intersection of arterial roadways. Right down the road from there, while not an overpass, we've also proposed some substantial intersection improvements at Timberline and Vine. Arterial intersection improvements continue, and when we say arterial, just for context, we mean the larger 4+ lane roads such as Harmony Road, College, Prospect, Mulberry, Timberline, the larger roadways that make up the city's grid. Continued bicycle and sidewalk expansion, bus stop improvements. On the reduction side of things, we are exploring new bike share models with the proliferation of e-scooters and other battery-based forms of travel. And with that, the current bike share provider has terminated its agreement with the city. So a temporary and hopefully temporary elimination of the bike share. And then with the decrease in tax revenues, there will be less available money for some of our street operations, and we've recommended to council lesser frequency on certain services like street sweeping and other roadway maintenance. Also within this budget is a proposed 5% reduction to transport's service hours as well. And so with that, just sort of bringing this presentation to a close, wanted to share with the group some of the upcoming dates and opportunities for engagement with the elected officials and with members of the city staff. Here on a go-forward basis, of course, last night on the 15th was our first of 2 public hearings. We're very grateful for the great feedback that we get from our residents. And then moving ahead, we've got 5 more scheduled public touch points. Starting first with this coming Tuesday, and the work session will cover the remaining 3 outcome areas, and then moving to a second budget public hearing on October 6th. We'll receive hopefully final council direction on October 13th, and then we'll move into the legal adoption cycle starting November 4th and 17th. So roughly 2 months remain before the budget is legally adopted, and that reflects the window of time for which the public has an opportunity to contribute and make their voice heard. So I'll wrap here with a website where you can learn more. You can view the budget in full, as well as an abbreviated version of the document. It's at rcity.fcgov.com/2021 budget. And note that there's not a www at the front of this URL. So if you're going to key it into your browser, you want to make sure that that is not included. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening, and we're looking forward to some open discussion, and we're here to listen to you. So I think I'm turning this back to Amanda first, if I'm remembering correctly.
We did have a question specifically around how to participate in upcoming public hearings. And so I think, Travis, you want to take a stab at that?
Absolutely. And I would welcome yourself, Amanda, my colleague and budget director, Lawrence Pollock, to backfill any of my initial commentary here. But I'm going to outline a couple opportunities. First, within the spirit of the question, the October 6th budget hearing, which I think was your intention behind the question, that meeting will start at 6 p.m. It's a hybrid meeting, so you can either attend live within the City Council chambers at 300 LaPorte, or there's a Zoom-based option, much like this evening, and the mayor will invite residents to raise their hand using the button functionality within the interface, and they're given a specific allotment of time to surface any questions or concerns that they have for the council or for city staff. So that's the public hearing itself. Along the way, you're certainly not limited to that one remaining public hearing. You can email your council members either individually or collectively at cityleaders@fcgov.com. We always invite you to engage with us on social media. And then the website that I shared, rcity.fcgov/2021 budget, is also an opportunity where there's sort of some free form questions that you can enter in a response. And then my colleagues within Amanda's team here are monitoring that regularly and passing your input through directly to the City Council. And at the October 13th work session, the City Council will receive a bound packet of all of the text that has been submitted through the website. So with that, Lawrence, Amanda, and any others, is there anything else that you'd highlight in terms of ways that the general public is able to be heard throughout the remainder of our cycle?
I would just add, Travis, that folks are welcome to call their council members as well if they have trouble with internet access. We can post the phone numbers as well as the emails in the chat for everyone, but phoning your council members is always welcome. It doesn't have to be through email or showing up.
All right, I think that's great. I'm going to continue to leave this poll up. It looks like we have about half of our participants have responded, but don't want to rush people, so we'll leave the polling up as we move on to another question. We've gotten a couple questions just around policing, transparency, and the police budget. Travis, I know you have some information just regarding the budget side of things. If you want to start, and then maybe Councilmember Grover, you can talk a little bit more about opportunities for broader conversation in that space.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And I'll open up with one comment. I will say that we've got leadership within Fort Collins Police Services that is very open and excited even to hear the feedback from our community on this matter. And our council is very, very attentive to it. So as far as what's being considered within the public safety budget now versus what are some of the avenues later that we can expect as the issue continues to unfold and be studied. So in the near term, the police budget does have reductions and redeploys considered within it. By way of example, there's a redirection of current police services funding in order to move to a homeless coordinator and homeless strategies. And there are several others that are not coming to mind right now that we will cover in this coming Tuesday's work session when the safe community outcome is covered. And then concurrently, actually, our very own Councilmember Gorgel is chairing an ad hoc committee that is studying the issue of the balancing act between public safety and community investments. And we're still working through these discussions as a staff and what ultimate recommendation we may have for the council for their consideration. But I would see this ad hoc committee continuing to study the issues and potentially make recommendations on funding all the way into 2021. So in other words, this budget may be adopted in the near term in the council approved state ultimately. And then they would leave the door open for some public process and continued study for if they wanted to change any of those funding balances going into the early part of 2021, just as a function of meeting the legal requirements of the budget while still giving the well-deserved justice to a full understanding and in-depth research of the police services budget. So with that kind of general overview of the process ahead, Councilmember Gorgel, if there's anything you'd like to add as the chairperson of that committee.
Sure, thank you, Travis. Yeah, for those who don't know, we do have an ad hoc committee, the Community Impact Committee, who are really looking at how do we create a safe and equitable community for all. So part of that is looking at the police funding, and part of it is looking at how do we uplift members of our community who have been most impacted. The next meeting is September 28th. It is virtual and people are welcome to attend and listen in. I'll post the link to the committee so you can get more information. To date, what we've done is look at what the police do and police services. And now we've really moved into what is the data telling us about our most impacted community members, specifically focusing on race. What do we know from the data where they are most impacted? And now we're also layering what have we heard. So we know that the city has continually gone back and asked community members what issues they are facing. And we've heard loud and clear that community members are really tired of saying that. So we've taken the data that we have from lived experience compared to the data that we have. With those two things overlapped, we will look at where we want to focus, and then we will start to bring in members of the community to really talk about what programming will really help people. So we really want to hear from people who are really impacted and get ideas about programming and what barriers they are experiencing to existing programming so that we can present some budget options to council. Unfortunately, because of the timing of the committee and really looking at a safe and equitable community for all has taken a lot of legwork. We don't have a budget recommendation for this budget, and we will be looking at a mid-cycle budget midway through the year at allocating some funding to support those community members. So I know in the Q&A there were some questions about how are we looking at specifically BIPOC and supporting and uplifting those community members. And this committee is really focused on that. And so the other half of that conversation is looking at police budget and what the police are doing. And I think they have been very open to the conversation and really looking at what do they do well and what could somebody else do better. And so I think when we look at mental health, people experiencing homeless, there's a good conversation that we're going to have. It's just right now we're focusing on programming, and then we will look at police budget later on. So I hope that answers the question. I will put the link to the impact committee. We also have a page that folks can submit ideas for programming as well. So I can put that up in addition. So if you have any more questions about that, please put them in the chat. I'll also put my email address as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Our next question is in regards to recreation and culture facilities. So since city facilities and recreation and culture are not anticipated or operating at pre-COVID levels, how many city employees have been, or positions have been eliminated and or reduced because of a reduced need for those positions?
Councilmember, would you like me to take an initial pass at that question? Thank you. So the staff has not made any permanent layoffs or reductions in force of the workforce within recreation and cultural services. However, on May 1st of this year, when it became apparent the sweeping impacts of the pandemic earlier in April, we did take the step of furloughing 618 of our workforce within those cultural services and recreation facilities. And here again, although the city has not taken any proactive planning around a formalized reduction in force, many of those colleagues have already chosen to terminate their employment with the city, given the uncertainty of when they would be able to come back to work, or perhaps they've chosen not to come back to work. And then as a more generalized remark, looking ahead into 2021, as it becomes more and more apparent what is a prudent and economically viable strategy for reopening and expanding the hours of the recreation facilities back to their previous levels, that those 618 coworkers of ours, it's an hourly workforce with a fluctuating schedule, generally speaking, and leadership within the recreation and cultural functions tend to schedule around this in such a way that it really first meets a service need, first and foremost, rather than a schedule need of the individuals there. In other words, we'll staff to the service levels, and apart from that, there's no formalized plan around any specific reductions in headcount.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, where can we find the Zoom link to be present online on October 6th? I'm happy to answer that one. We post the different links to participate in our council meetings on our homepage on fcgov.com. And so usually right at the top of the webpage, there's a header in it, and you'll just click on the words that say participate in remote meeting. You can also watch that live streamed. Usually a little yellow text pops up that says watch the live meeting. So you have an opportunity to also just watch the live stream if you're not wanting to make a comment. And those links are usually posted about a week in advance. Thank you for the question. Okay, the next one is a question about why the city manager's recommended budget recommends that the Conservation Trust Fund be used for parks maintenance instead of for its intended purpose by council resolution. Travis or Lawrence, I don't know if either of you are able to take that one.
Lawrence, would you like to take this response? So Lawrence Pollock is the city's budget director and has been a highly valued teammate of ours within financial services. So Lawrence, please.
So thank you for the question. This, as you can imagine, was an extremely challenging budget process for a number of the reasons that we're all aware of, but details that Travis had presented earlier. And so, frankly, it came down to our intended, one of the number one goals that in the recommended budget was the continuity of service provision. And so although this recommendation is against that 1983 resolution, it is a resolution as opposed to an ordinance. And so that it was prioritized to keep 500,000 of city services as opposed to making additional reductions. And so that's the primary driver. Obviously, it is council's prerogative to make those changes. And one council member made a request last night to identify options, which staff will do. So I guess that would be the response. Anything else you'd add to that, Travis?
Thanks for that. I would underscore the members of the council have indicated a strong desire to explore this issue more fully. It's not without precedent. There's a previous recession, and I do not recall, I apologize if it was the 07-08 recession or the 2001-2002 recession, where this was done temporarily for many similar reasons around continuity of operations and maintenance rather than expansion. And here again, as a city staff, I know I speak for our city manager when saying that this is simply a list of recommendations, and this really is the opportunity for our elected officials to make it their own, so to speak. And we'll respect the ultimate wishes of the city council on this.
Thank you, Travis. So another general question that we have received is, what happens if revenues change or go, what happens if they go up or down?
Well, first of all, to the person who asked the question, if you know if revenues are going to go up or down, please do call me. But on a more serious note, there is still a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and the economy is likely going to follow the path of the virus. And I am not able to predict the path of the virus, and there are many smarter people than I am that are trying to do just that. So as far as the contingency planning, what staff intends to do is lay out a recommended process for council at the October Council Finance Committee session. At the council's option, they may consider bringing forward a resolution to memorialize that process, so that if we get into January, February, March, or onward, and our situation improves or deteriorates, we've got a plan that the council has previously approved that we can then deploy. I will share that I don't necessarily see at this point for the October Finance Committee meeting or the November budget adoption that it's going to be an itemized list of here are the things that we would refund first if things were better, or here are the things that we would cut first if things were worse. Rather, I think it's a design of a process to reach those determinations if and when we need to, when those trigger points are tripped in 2021. So I hope that provides some additional context. And naturally, we as a staff are very, very concerned and studying closely what is the trajectory and trend of our revenue streams.
Thank you, Travis. So I just want to remind folks too about the poll that we have. If you haven't already, it looks like we are missing a few folks. Would love to get input from as many people as possible. So if you have a moment, please do take a minute to give us some feedback on the changes that we've proposed in the different outcome areas. And we'll move on to next one. So another question. This one's kind of related to one earlier with recreation and cultural facilities. Just what are folks at the Lincoln Center doing when no activities are occurring?
So I can speak in general terms rather than specifics. The vast majority, overwhelming even majority of the staff that generally works at the Lincoln Center, they don't have any scheduled hours if there's no event programming. We do have a small dedicated full-time staff to event and cultural services programming beyond just the Lincoln Center. They have continued to work and continued to try to find ways to foster the cultural arts within our community. By way of example, even the painted barriers within Old Town that you see outside some of the restaurants, outdoor dining areas, is work that's being coordinated through that group right now. If there's further interest in the question, I'd be happy to take a call or email and bring in Jim McDonald, our Cultural Services Director, to give you a more specific list. But in general terms, when the services go down, much of the workforce is also scaled down in terms of their scheduled hours.
Thanks, Travis. And I also have seen private events. I know private events have started to occur. We had some photos that were submitted to our office of a socially distanced wedding that occurred there recently that was really fun. So I know that they're also working to accommodate some of those private events throughout the Lincoln Center as well. Okay.
Amanda, can I answer there's some questions about data.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
Great, thank you. I saw some questions in the Q&A about data about race and ethnicity, and I think one thing to note is that in the last mid-year budget cycle, Council approved the development of equity indicators. Staff has been working with a firm in Oakland to develop those indicators for our city, and I think that they will hopefully shed a lot of light on the data that's being requested. Those will come before council and during a work session, and we will be able to look at those equity indicators and make sure that they're aligned with what we want. And so I really encourage those who are concerned about that to keep up to date with those equity indicators. We will get a preview at that committee, Community Impact Committee, that I posted the information on the 28th. And so I think that will be a really good starting point to really look at race and ethnicity and the equity indicators within our city. We just haven't done that before. And so I'm excited for those to come, and hopefully that will help with some of that data that has been requested. Yeah, Amanda?
I was just gonna say, I think there's a follow-up question if there's any sort of ETA on that.
I can pull up the 6-month calendar during the next question and take a look. I also just wanted to note that there was a question about supporting BIPOC and LGBTQ plus businesses. And through our economic health department, we are prioritizing what they classify as DBEs, disadvantaged businesses, which are BIPOC, women, veteran, LGBTQ plus, with CARES funding and other supports so that folks can stay open. So if you know of businesses that fall into this category that need extra support, we can connect them with the Economic Health Department, as that is a priority under our budget and our current operations right now. Lastly, I think there are some questions about police and collecting race and ethnicity data with that. And I am sure I won't do the bill justice, but there was a state bill passed that is requiring police departments to collect this information. And so we are currently working on a software to collect that information, and then it will be reported to the state. So I know that is being built out, and so we will have that information. Unfortunately, it will take a few years. So we understand the concern and the need for that, and the state did require that, so we will be working on it. So if you have more information about those indicators, please let me know and we can get more information. So thanks.
And Councilmember Gorgel, we have one last question, and I think we're winding down and looking at probably a nice natural stop here at 7. But before I go back to our poll, I just wanted to, I'm sure this one is directed to you, Councilmember Gorgel. Should funds be set aside in this proposed budget to make suggested improvements from your committee?
Oh, well,
I think there was also a generous suggestion of $500,000 to $1 million.
I would not turn that money down. You know, that was brought up at the last at a work session, and that discussion was, so I think we will be talking more about that, about when we want to earmark that money. I think there is always a concern that, especially with the new council, that they would not honor that committee's work. So I think it's a great discussion, and we'll be talking about it with the other council members to really earmark those funds.
Thank you. And just when I said there was one last question, we get a couple more in, and a couple comments too that we can make sure that we capture. Travis, I'm going to send this one to you as a start. Is there a plan in place if revenues do not increase and or if the city is shut down due to COVID again?
So much like the previous contingency dialogue, the contents of such a plan is really composed of what are the triggers for such a point in time where we have reason to believe that the revenues are down in a permanent way and may not be coming back, rather than a prescribed list of the cuts or reductions in service that we would make or recommend in response to those. So it's a series of prompts, if you will, to tee up the discussion. And one of the things that we really appreciate, at least as a staff, about budgeting for outcomes is that you've got an itemized list based on how much funding is available, where as the money runs out, anything that is below the line, so to speak, on the page is not funded. So we've immediately got kind of a reference point on the shelf where if we know that there's less money available, then that water line moves within the BFO framework, subject, of course, to what would likely be a robust council discussion. So here again, I wouldn't describe it as a blueprint of the budget cuts that would be made. And then I would share with you editorially that this is a budget this year that balances cuts with use of reserves, existing city reserves, with use of outside federal dollars. And that if we were at this time next year and had continued reason to believe that there was this level of revenue risk, we will very likely have to move further down the direction of cuts given the volume of reserves that were proposed to use within 2021. So without a doubt, a very complex, volatile set of issues around the revenue picture. And we think that rather than having a prescriptive plan, it's the systems themselves that serve us well in responding to those external factors. And thanks for the question.
Thanks, Travis. I got the date for the equity indicators and it's December 8th. So a little bit of ways.
Thank you. And it looks like Mayor Troxel popped on and had his hands up. So I wanted to give him an opportunity to jump on. So Troxel, if you want to pop on.
You bet.
Should be able to.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. And I just want to thank Councilmember Gorgel for hosting this session. And on behalf of all the city council and all the city staff, as we go through the budget discussions, that everyone's voice is important. And we think that these outreach opportunities and this discussion is so important. So I just want to thank Emily and her leadership in our community and providing for this opportunity for voices to be heard within our community. And I just want to encourage everyone that's participating to continue to participate in the conversation in our community. We have a wonderful community in so many ways, and it relates to this session and many other things within our community that enable everyone to participate. And Emily, thank you. And I just want to lend my support to the conversation and encouragement for everyone to participate. So Emily, thank you. And I just wanted to participate and say thank you.
Well, great. Thank you for joining, Mayor. And I know that we have Kristen Stevens and Susan Gutaski on the line listening as well. So we have a few council members here listening to people and their questions.
Right.
All right. Thank you all. I have closed the polling, and Councilmember Gorgel, I don't know if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share. I know we've put some information in the chat for people to continue to engage, but I'll let you have our final remarks before we sign off this evening.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining. And as was mentioned, we will have another one of these next Wednesday at the same time. So if you have additional questions or thought of anything in the meantime, or I always like it when people say that they they want a certain program, and then we can work towards that. So any ideas, and you know, we do really welcome your feedback, and are listening and really trying to balance a budget of millions of dollars of cuts. And so we welcome your feedback and knowing what those priorities are in our community. So thank you everyone for taking the evening to be with us, and please come back next week and we can answer more questions.